This video should be probably the most time-consuming part of the whole skinning process, and you only really have to know how to use a few tools, which I will show you how to use in the video, but the majority of this time I really just spend trying to refine it and trying to make sure that everything looks good when it's bending. So I will mark through chapters when I show you how to use the different tools, but other than that, just go through and just make sure that you're refining it and make sure that everything looks correct after you've finished adjusting your envelopes and adding custom weights to your vertices. Now it's time to skin the alien. Now before I begin, I want to point a few things out. First of all, you'll notice that I've unhid everything, so everything is visible, and everything can be selected here except for the templates. We don't really need the templates. Now, when you're doing the skinning, if you did things correctly, if we look over here in the hierarchy tab, and actually this is the layer tab right now, hierarchy would be over on this one. Hierarchy tab shows you how things are linked to each other. But in the layer tab, you should have things organized by the item type. Now, if you'll recall with our naming convention, what you have to do is you start off with the type of object that it is. So if we have bone, bone would be BN, bone end would be BE. And we also have our root down here. If you named things properly, this process is going to be very simple when we actually add the bones to the skin. We also will be at times toggling these layers on and off because we will need to move different things at different points. But right now, I'm just going to start with having everything kind of toggled on. So I'm going to select the mesh. We go to the Modify tab, and I'm going to go to the Skin modifier. So you just type in Skin. So if you go down here to where you will eventually see the list of bones, all you have to do here is select Add. And if you did this correctly, if you come up here to bones, you should be able to select everything except for the bone ends and the root. I'm going to hold down Alt and deselect root. Actually, that didn't work. Here, let's go to bone end. So I held down Shift to select all of those. Now I'm going to hold down Control and select the spine. Okay, leave the bone ends out, leave the root out, because you do not want those to affect the mesh when you're skinning your alien. Okay, so now everything has been added. And if you start up here, you'll notice that everything starts with a BN, which is what we want, and we have the left side is first. This is the reason why we name it this way. And then we have the right side is going to be next. And then everything is alphabetical order after that. So let's take a look at the chest. Now, when you're looking at the skinning, now notice I have edit envelopes turned on. If you don't have that turned on, you're not going to be able to see this effect that we've got right here. Also, I believe what you have selected up here affects it as well. So I'd recommend just having edit polygon on, just turn off polygon so that way the entire mesh is selected. Okay, so select edit envelopes. Now this is the chest bone. You'll notice that the chest bone is kind of bleeding over into a lot of other areas. So this is going to be a problem, but a bigger problem that you would have is if you made it too small, and if you made the envelopes too small, because then it wouldn't grab any vertices at all. So we are going to work with editing these envelopes a little bit later, but at first I wanted to take a look just down this list and see how everything looks. So we've got our head bone. Clearly the head bone would not affect all of this area right here. You've got your hip bone. Looks pretty good, but it should not be grabbing the arms. You got the ball of the foot. We've got our bicep, the forearm. We've got our hand. Let's spin around and take a look at it. Okay, it overextends a little bit there. Got our heel, got the index, another index. So that's index 1, 2, and 3. Got the middle 1, 2, and 3. Now it looks a little gray here, so it almost looks like it's not grabbing vertices that it should. But we'll take a look at that later. Got our pinky 1, 2, and 3. Got the shin, the shoulder, the thigh, and now we're going into the thumb. The toe. Let's see here. There's the neck. And now we're moving on to the right side. So the right side should be pretty much identical to what you saw on the left side if you actually mirrored things correctly. And it doesn't really matter because what we are going to do is we are going to actually edit the envelopes on one side. That way we can mirror it over to the other and we can cut our work in half. Now, when I am working in this area, I want to select the envelopes. I don't really need to see the bones right now. Actually, I'll take that back. Well, I don't need to see the bones, but I do need to see the helpers. And the reason for that is because I need to be able to test to see how things work. So let's work on the right side right now. I'm going to grab the foot helper and I'm going to bend this up. And actually that looks pretty good. It's not bad. If you make your envelopes well, and if you do your boning well before you actually go into the skinning, there's going to be minimal edits that you have to do with the envelopes to make this look right. Okay, I'm going to also show you a trick that's going to help with this. So we're actually going to use auto key, and I'm going to move this forward. First of all, just for fun, I'm just going to create a key there, keyframe. I'm going to move this forward a little bit. Now I'm going to lift this foot up, and I'm also going to alter a couple things because I want to make sure that everything is turning correctly. Okay, so now it looks kind of strange, but that's okay because what I'm going to do now is turn the auto key off. I'm going to run this back to the start position. What this is going to allow me to do is to see what the joints look like when they've bent without having to move things back and forth over and over and over again. So this is going to actually help me to be able to kind of mess with this mesh a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and select the skin, select Edit Envelopes, and let's start messing around with these envelopes. So I'm going to select the skin, and the first thing that you need to understand is how the envelopes work. So first of all, we don't really need to see the bone, so you can make sure that's hidden. But if we come up here to Edit Envelopes, you can actually see where all the envelopes are located. And we are going to select the envelopes, and as you can see, if I rotate around, we have this inner capsule and we have an outer capsule. Now, ideally what you want to happen is you want the capsules in this colored area to only really be covering the areas that you want to be influenced by this. Now this is really going to work best if you can actually be in the right viewport, so I'm going to click right here, and what you're going to need to do is you will need to move your capsules so that they're in an ideal position. So if you see this little point at the end of this yellow line right here, I want to select that, and you'll notice the gizmo's at a different place, and that's okay. I'm going to kind of just move that around to the ankle. Now I'm going to need to adjust the inner gizmo because I don't want it to control too much, but we need to make sure that it has a pretty solid control over the area of the mesh that we want this bone to be in. And by the way, what determines these gizmos is actually the bones that you put in there, the bones in the fins. So when you create your bones in your fins, if you didn't use scale on them at all, they'll appear round like this. If you used scale on any of them that are in the hierarchy, then they might look squished and you might have some different effects, some unintended results. So just something to be really careful about. You definitely don't want to run into that. Okay, so I do want this to bleed a little bit into the next part right here because, if your bones are moving on this side, it does pull on the skin. So it's kind of like a push and pull, between the two. Move that back to right. I'm going to try to move, I'm clicking on this intersection point here. And let's see here. Yeah, probably, and I can always adjust this later if I need to. I think that looks about right. Now, something that I didn't know before, and you might notice that my voice might sound just a little bit different because this is a year later, and you're also, than when I recorded the rest of the video, and you also notice the date is different. That's because I've learned some things over the past year that really help this process out. So I highly recommend that you take my advice here because I'm going to help to make your life a lot easier. So you actually want to spend a decent amount of time adjusting these bone envelopes and making sure that the envelopes are good before you actually go into the rest of your alien. And the reason for that is because you'll notice that this is affecting a lot of vertices all at once. And if I can get things close to where I need it to be right now, and notice this looks a little pinched right here, that's okay. You can, because the reason it's doing that is because we have another bone that is also pulling influence on it that probably has too much. So make sure that your bones are lined up so that it looks like where they are supposed to be, and then you can go on and you can kind of adjust other things as you need to. But yeah, as I was saying, you do want to actually spend a decent amount of time in adjusting your bones, your envelopes, in order to make sure that they look good. Also, another thing that's going to help you out a lot is actually change it from view to local. I forgot to do that. But when you change it from view to local, it's going to make sure that when you are extending this bone, for example, you'll notice the x-axis is pointing straight out. So when I make it longer or shorter, it's actually going just to move straight. If you don't have it in local, if you have it in view, you're going to be moving it in kind of in a skew direction. So definitely make sure it's in local. Okay, putting it back in right. Going to pan over. That definitely is influencing things. Well, that bone kind of is a little bit. Going to go into the hip. So I'm just gonna move that because I really want this to be more, well, yeah, I'll keep it there for now. Now you'll notice that things aren't going to bend exactly how you want them to at first. Like for example, this knee bend looks pretty unnatural, but that actually is fine because you're going to learn how to use some tools later that are going to make it a little bit more precise. But as for now, just make sure that it looks fairly even between them, and you actually are going to want to go into every single bone in the body and make sure that they look good. In case you haven't been able to figure it out yet, if you select this outer ring, you'll notice it turns kind of this purple color. And basically what you can do is you can just grab the gizmo on the side in order to adjust it. And this is going to have kind of an outer limit. It's going to be the fall off of the influence that that envelope has over the mesh that this overlaps with. And the center one is going to basically determine how much the intensity is going to fall off between the center of the envelope and the outer edge. So that's kind of what gives you a little bit of control over that. But if you just click on the ring, then a gizmo will appear and then you can just kind of adjust it from there. Now you'll notice that it only really works on one of the gizmo, on one of the axes. So just mess around until you find out which one. So in this case, it looks like it's X that's actually working. And then if you select the center of the envelope, like this little yellow rod, then that allows you to actually adjust its position specifically. Now you're going to notice that you are going to have some awkward pinches. Like after I adjusted the hip bones and then the leg, you notice that it kind of overlaps with itself here. That's fine. You actually are trying to aim more for getting a balance between the two so that when you do bend something that it bends it kind of evenly on both sides so that it doesn't look like it's favoring one side more than the other. Even this thing going on with the leg here is okay because like I said earlier, we're going to be able to do some things that are going to adjust that to make it so that this bend looks a lot more natural. As I'm going, I also want to point something out. You notice that this particular spine here, you can actually see it's highlighted over here on the right. The spine envelope is way overextending. It's going into areas that it should not influence at all. So this really just comes down to just make sure that you are adjusting your envelopes so that they aren't going out into areas that they're not supposed to. And remember that trick that I showed you too. So you can turn on auto key. We can move this forward. If I move it to 12, then I can actually come back here, turn off edit envelopes, and let's make some movements so that we can actually see the effect of our skin. And you can see this looks pretty messed up, and there's a good reason for it. And we're going to actually look at all of those reasons, and sometimes mistakes are made too, and you're going to have to go back and fix those. But anyway, so you can see that this is messed up, but if I turn auto key off and I bring this back, it goes back into position. So this is going to allow us to test it without having to physically move it every single time. I also wanted to point out something. I know that I just mentioned mistakes, but you'll notice how this envelope right here is not moving with the body. That's because I probably, and if I recall when I did this before, I think there is a bone that I forgot to link. Now, this is why it's important to really check all of your bones before you submit the project, because I'm going to have to go back in, find that bone, and we have to reconnect it to fix it. In order to do that, I'm going to turn off the mesh, turn the bones back on so that I can see them. And let's rotate this forward, and yep, you can see there's definitely a problem there. So I want these two bones to move whenever the torso moves, the chest right here. So I'm going to select those, I'm going to link those, and now you'll see that this bone flipped. Typically, that's a pretty easy solution. Here, let's see what it looks like now. Okay, so at least it's moving with it. But if we head over here into the shoulder, and if I believe that it's in the motion tab, we take a look at rotation. I deselected keep initial offset, and it looks like that fixed that. I'm going to test a couple things here just to make sure that it's working correctly. Okay, yep, that works. And let's see here, does this one work too? Yep. Okay, so hopefully that fixed our problem. Going to turn the bones back off, turn the mesh back on. Okay, so now the torso is moving forward. It's looking a little bit less messed up, but Still looking pretty messed up, to be honest. But that's why we have to work on the envelopes and just continue adjusting things until it looks right. It's a good idea to also test the hands. So I set that up as well, as you can see here. I'll go back in here and go to edit envelopes, and you'll notice that the fingers actually extend a little bit too far. So you'll definitely want to adjust those as well. Okay, so now this might surprise you, but this is actually fine for what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm just adjusting the envelopes. I wanted to make sure that everything was decently balanced, so that things are kind of equally weighted and stuff isn't crossing over into areas where it shouldn't. So I've adjusted the bones. Here, I'll just actually go through the list. So there's the chest, the head, I've got the hips, got the ball of the foot, okay, we've got the arms, got the hands, and got the heel, index, here. Yeah, so that's the left heel. But we've got our index fingers. I've actually went through and adjusted the envelopes in those because if you don't, they are going to cross over into each other quite a bit. And trust me, it's going to feel like it's kind of tedious what you're doing right now, but trust me, this is going to be saving you a lot of time in the long run, coming through in here and adjusting these things now, just the envelopes. And it's okay that it looks messed up because there's actually something else that I'm going to show you how to do that's going to really help to kind of clean this up. And that is painting weights. Now I'm going to show you a couple things about this. First of all, we've got this little wrench thing here that you can see. So that is our weight table. Now, whenever I select a vertex, because we're actually going in and changing the weights of specific vertices that we have selected. So if I, for example, go over here and select vertices, now I can click on a vertex, and you'll notice that it's going to show me what envelopes actually are kind of having a little bit of a tug of war for that particular piece. And it also tells you the weight that is associated with them. Now we've got some here that look really messed up, especially in the torso. So if I was to look at, say, this piece right here, it's got a little bit of hip and a little bit of spine kind of built into it. But I want it to kind of balance out between the two bones or the two envelopes that are trying to fight for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Paint Weights. I'm going to make sure that this is still checked, because when I say Paint Blend Weights, what it does is it actually balances the two out. It's going to basically kind of pull it together so that it looks a little bit more even. But you'll notice that my selection tool here is huge. I do not want it to be that big. So I'm going to click on these three dots over to the right, and I'm going to go to my max size, and I'm going to decrease that significantly. All right, so that works. Now it's going to be trying to balance things basically within that radius. So I'm going to click on this, and you'll notice that it's pulling everything forward. So it's going to look a little better already than it did before. See, it's kind of evening things out. Now the way that this works is that it actually is going to take, let's see here, I'll deselect paint weights and I'm going to show you something. So it takes something that has multiple bones between it and adjusts it. Now notice how this hip right here, how it doesn't have actually anything else except for the hip bone that actually is influencing it. So it can't really change the weight. If no other envelope is within range, then it will be automatically set to 1. So if I wanted to have something else that would actually pull on it a little bit, I'd have to make sure that I've come in here. I try to add that in. So you notice that now spine has been added into that one. Now that is the blend weights. Now you'll notice that that's good at trying to find kind of the middle ground, but it doesn't really take anything away. Now we hopefully will have minimized our need to actually remove a bone's influence from an area by adjusting the envelopes before. See, that looks so much better than it did before. But sometimes you're going to have a little bit of a crossover, and especially up in the shoulders, you'll see that there's a lot of craziness going on up here. And if I select that, it looks like that is bicep and shoulder, and chest. And really, should the chest have any kind of influence over that? I'm going to click on chest and see how that's kind of bleeding over. Yeah, I really don't want it to be over there like that. However, if I stay clicked on this blend weights, watch what's going to happen. Yeah, it's kind of even it out, but that still is bringing the chest into this area. If I want to remove it altogether, I have to deselect this. Now I want you to notice something here. Look at these numbers. I'm going to hold down Alt on the keyboard. Now I'm going to click on this. Notice how it turned white or gray. That means it is moving the chest's influence over that area. Now there's some vertices that I can't see. Yeah, it makes sense for the chest to be in those areas. So maybe something else shouldn't have so much influence over that shoulder. See what's pulling on it. It looks like the bicep is pulling on it a lot. We definitely want that to be a little bit more blended, because it shouldn't be 99% bicep and 1% shoulder and nothing else. Chest definitely needs to have some kind of an influence over there because it's right there. So I'm going to click on Paint Blend Weights. I'm going to reduce the size a little bit more. That way I don't accidentally select something I don't want. Definitely want to have more chest in there. You know what? I want to have even more. I want to make it a little more drastic, so I'm going to deselect that. Now I'm not going to click on Alt, but I'm just going to click on this. Look at that. It actually made it 1. So if you need to actually add something to an envelope, if you have that deselected and you click on it, that's gonna put it in there. If you hold down Alt, then it's going to remove that weight. Now, if you want to make it so that it only changes it a little bit, you can actually alter the max strength. So that way it doesn't make it go like 1 or 0. So notice if I have 0.1, I click on it, see how much it's going down now. Just a little bit. Okay, so let's pull this forward. Yeah, you know what? I think I definitely want to bring some of this in. The chest should have some kind of influence over this. That blue basically means that it's only changing it very, very subtly. I'm going to click and hold, and you drag over it, and you can see it kind of is evening things out here. Now let's make this a little bit bigger. All right, let's see about the bicep. So the bicep really kind of makes sense for it to have some sort of influence over these areas. Maybe it needs to have more over that. Because when it's turning, definitely should have more influence under the armpit. Reduce the size, crank up the strength, and let's turn paint weights off. Actually, let's crank the strength down a little. Let's blend this. This is kind of looking a little messed up. Anyway, you kind of get the idea. Trying to get this to not look as messed up as it is. It could be also that I just have the way I have the arm bent in the animation is kind of unnatural, so that can also affect it. I don't really want the chest to be on that part of the arm. So the goal of what we're trying to get to here is basically we want it to look fairly smooth. Even if it looks a little bit pinched, it's okay. Like, for example, if we're going to look at the knee, so you just kind of have to keep on working at it until everything looks balanced. Kind of have to rotate around. Gonna have to probably come in here, blend this a little bit more. I don't need to make it that strong in the torso, but I do want it to have something. Here we go. But remember when I was talking about the knee earlier? Well, there's actually something else that you're gonna learn later on called the gizmo. But also something I wanted to point out. Notice how this is nowhere near the area of influence. When I have the paint blend weights on, I can't add it, which is what I want. However, sometimes you actually want to add something in that just isn't within range, and you can, but you have to have that deselected. But now that's going to add something new into it that you don't necessarily actually want to be in it. And if you check it by coming over here and selecting one of the vertices that it's, see, now the chest is a part of it. So in order to remove that, because sometimes you will accidentally select something you don't want to, just remember, have that deselected, hold down Alt, paint weights, and do this. Something else, and then just kind of, yeah, move over it until it's gone. Something else that I want you to know, to notice is that, do you see how chest is still on that list? It didn't actually remove it. It gave it a weight of 0. That's a problem because when you're blending the weights later on, it's going to add the chest back in. So if you ever get something to 0, but you want to make sure it's gone forever, or at least until you add it back in deliberately, You want to come down over here to the side, go down to advanced parameters, and there's something here that says remove zero weights. Now it's gone and it's not going to actually bring it into the balance when you're trying to blend the weights again. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is to go through and you're just going to do some adjustments. Anything that the envelopes weren't able to make look right, I want you to paint the weights in order to make them so that it looks just a little bit more even. It's okay to have a little bit of pinch. It's okay to have something that's even looks a little bit twisted as long as it's twisting evenly while you're doing it and it's not like things aren't jutting out in weird directions. That's all right. Okay, so I was right. It really is just kind of an animation thing. This thing was twisting down. That's what made it uneven. So I just lifted it up, and now the arm looks a lot more natural. And it's going to be easier to edit as well. But basically, that's what you're kind of going for. You can see what it looked like before. You can see what it looks like now. And you just want to make sure that when you're running through the animation, that it's looking pretty even. You have to keep in mind, this is probably a position that I am not going to have this alien actually be in at any point in the animation. I'm only doing this just to see kind of where the pinch points are and seeing if anything is moving in an unnatural, direction or, bulging in a weird way. So, that's all stuff that, you can adjust, at this level. But once it looks pretty smooth, kind of like how it does in this arm, and even on this hand, the hand is actually a really great place where you can kind of see how painting the weights can help you out because it's a lot more straightforward than the shoulder. And it has and you can see how the fingers are kind of moving in a way where they're not like tugging on each other. Whereas, and if I was going to come over here, I forgot the version of the alien that I pulled up right now actually doesn't have this hand set up, but you would see actually really, you'd see like spikes and stuff coming out of the fingers because it's the animation is actually envelopes are pulling on fingers that they have no business actually pulling on. Once everything looks pretty smooth and even when you're bending it, then you can move on to the next stage. And it's okay. Again, we'll do something to address this later on. You'll see how to do it, so there's a nice fix for that. Something else that I don't know if you noticed, but you know how when we moved the envelopes before, um, well, this is the reason why you want to actually adjust the envelopes before you go in and start doing the custom weights, because check it out. The envelope is not going to actually adjust. It's not going to affect anything that you've applied a custom weight to. It only applies things to things where the custom weight has not actually been physically painted on. So if you adjusted your envelopes well before, congratulations. You'll have an easier time with this than everybody who just kind of skips that step and goes to do the custom weighting later.